All right, friends, welcome back to the Applied Leadership Podcast. I'm Blaine. This is my partner, Brandon. And we are bringing you two friends, one question, half an hour, zero script. And we've got a really good question coming in today. And essentially, the question is this, Brandon: how do you balance taking care of your people while also taking care of the mission? This is sort of an age-old question of leadership, and in many ways, right at the foundation of everything I think most of us are trying to do as leaders. And I remember being a young leader in the Army and hearing that phrase, mission first, people always. I mean, the Army, in all of its infinite wisdom, understood that taking care of your people and taking care of the mission were both important, but they gave us a convoluted phrase through which we could try to make sense of it. And I'm not sure I ever really fully got it. And I remember talking to our good friend Joe Quinn more recently, and he submitted to me that once you get into life outside the Army, maybe you just need to invert those two, and maybe it's people first, mission always, which I like, but I'm still not exactly sure how to put that into play. So maybe I'll just ask you, what do you think? Balancing kind of taking care of the mission while taking care of your people.
I don't know.
There's an honest answer right there. That's good media.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think that is honest. Like it's hard. First and foremost, it's very difficult to consider that because your organization, your team exists to conduct a mission in some way, shape, or form. You exist as a company to serve your customer, to deliver value into the world. And so if you're not delivering value into the world under the mission, the mandate, the focus that you're created to do, then you don't have any people to take care of and to make sure that you're providing for. At the same time, if you don't have the people to bring the mission to life, to deliver the value, to bring passion and inspiration and effort into it, then, well, you're not going to be delivering value at all. In fact, you're not going to be accomplishing that mission. And so I think the paradox is there. The Army tends to give us axioms like that, where you sit there and you scratch your head and you say like, oh my God, this is like so Army. That doesn't make any damn sense, right? Like mission first, people
They can get you both ways.
Yeah,
you know
exactly,
I mean?
right?
You're wrong either way.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's so like Army. And then years after the fact, at least I'll speak for myself, I look back at that, something like that, and say, damn, that's brilliant. That's actually brilliant. You've actually captured the paradox, the inherent tension that is in the reality of any organization. Because any organization is just a sum total of its people. And we know as leaders that, people don't follow organizations, they follow people. And so, it's tough. And I think if you haven't banged up against that as a leader, you will. Or maybe you're like a sociopath and you just don't think about people or anything like that. That probably won't work out well for you either. But
it's not a good long-term play, but whatever. You can really squeeze a couple good quarters out of that, probably.
I guess, maybe it works for others, but I think both have to be front and center always. Honestly, I think both have to be spoken about and understood. I think that we as leaders can't ignore the fact that we're here to execute a mission, especially when unpopular decisions come down, and sometimes unpopular decisions hurt people and they have negative impacts upon people, and it's tough. And I think in moments like that, we just have to be leaders. That's where we kind of earn our salt, so to speak, and we have to be willing to say like, hey, I get it. Like let's I want to hear what you have to say. I'm interested. Help me understand what you're seeing from your perspective. And we still have to accomplish this mission, or else, frankly, we're just hanging out. We don't have a don't have a context by which we're having these conversations.
Yeah, there's a circular nature to it for sure, and I would maybe just reframe the question and say these are not two things that really need to be balanced. They need to be put into harmony or into integration, as we might say. You have to have both, clearly. And I like what you're pointing out about the mission and maybe why the Army puts the mission first. And it clearly makes sense for an organization like the military, because in service of the mission, you are going to have to put people in harm's way where they could be, seriously injured or killed even in the execution of their duty. And so if you don't have kind of a mission first mindset while taking care of your people, it's kind of antithetical to the whole point of the organization, I suppose. And in, the public sector or the private sector, nonprofit sector, that's naturally a bit different. But I do think it's worth pointing out that if there's no mission, then there's no need for the people. And I would say that we're at a time right now where there's a lot of really natural tension and even friction in organizations where people are understandably asking to be taken well care of. They want to work in conditions that suit them, whether that's working from home or in nice offices or flexible hours, whatever the case may be, because they believe that they can be most productive and most happy and therefore do the best work and provide the most value to the customer, shareholders, whomever, in those conditions. And I don't disagree with that. I think that organizations should be generous, should take care of their people, because if you take good care of your people, they're likely to take good care of you. And I think continuity and consistency and having a team that stays together and plays together is a good recipe for success. So I agree with all of that. I'm all for it. And I've always tried to uphold that from my end as a leader. And I think we have to remind ourselves and perhaps others at times that companies, organizations are not just kind of social welfare organizations. They don't exist for the express purpose of hiring and onboarding people and providing them with salaries and benefits so that they can pay their mortgages and go to private school or whatever. That's not why they exist. They do exist to perform a function, to achieve a mission, to serve a customer, to deliver value in the marketplace, et cetera, et cetera. And so I would hate for the leaders of an organization to feel so much pressure to take such amazing care of their people that they lose sight of the fact that they need people to join their team in support of a mission that they're trying to accomplish together. And sometimes that's going to lead to hard work. Sometimes that's going to lead to having to let people go. There are just realities of executing a business that leaders have to deal with. And because you're willing to wrestle with those realities and keep the health of the business at the forefront and continue to serve your customers and allow that thing to propel forward, if in the execution of that, the faithful and dutiful execution of that, there are negative outcomes for some people, you still have to mind the store. You still have to look after the whole. That's your kind of fiduciary responsibility. And you can't waver on that too much. And there are going to be times where you can give a little profit margin in order to keep someone on board because there's a long-term benefit to the company. In that case, you definitely should do that. But if there are things going on in the organization that are dragging it down and are truly detrimental to the organization, and you may have to disappoint somebody or let somebody down in an effort to do what's best for the whole, which by the way includes lots of other people in your organization, then I don't think you can shy away from that. And I think this is a very pressing issue for a lot of people right now, which is probably why we got the question. And so maybe going back to the paradoxical Army phrase is kind of a good one. Mission first and people always. If there's no mission, there's no people. So let's make sure that we're doing that first. And every step of the way, let's be sure that we're doing right by people in service of that mission.
Yeah, it just reminds me of, a term that I have heard a number of times over the years and has come out of my mouth, which is, I think you always have to be careful about allowing people to hold your organization hostage, so to speak.
Oof.
And I think that's something that a lot of leaders feel. I've certainly felt that, been in a tough position where, I'm looking at the execution of the goals for the year and seeing that, there's maybe a key player who kind of has that tendency to push, to push the, for just a little more and a little more and a little more and a little more, to that sense where it's like, geez, I just kind of feel like not only is the organization being held hostage, but the mission is being put in jeopardy at the behest of this, these demands and things of that nature. And I've just never really responded in a very pliable way to that kind of approach. Candidly, I've said this so many times to others that, especially in sales, you hear a lot of people talk about, well, I can come over and I can bring these accounts with me. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Like, that's just, I'd be very careful about, hiring those quote unquote assassins. Because eventually, in 18 to 24 months, they're gonna do that, to the next place. And frankly, like, how are you considering the mission? That just kind of seems like it's solely focused on you. And I just don't know. For me, I have always come to those places, and really it feels more like friction to me than tension, where I feel that someone is trying to hold the organization hostage, or I feel that the individual's needs have so overshot an understanding of the mission or what we're doing that, there has to be almost kind of like a difficult conversation, a line of demarcation where just like you, I mean, I'm completely interested in generosity, caring for, our people, in providing an excellent workplace. And whenever I feel like we're kind of bumping up against what we actually are there to achieve, I'm pretty quick to call time out and just say, hey, listen, like, let's just be super clear on what we do here and why we do it, and how we go about doing it can, that changes and all that. I'm super open to that conversation. I'm super unwilling to have a conversation that takes us outside of the intent of of why we do what we do and what we're trying to do for people in the world, at the behest of, your comforts, your maybe complaints that might be a little too strong. I'm willing to hear. What's that? Your preferences. Yeah. Your preferences. I mean, that's the right way to say it, because I'm totally willing to hear anybody's, concerns. Give me the issue discussion recommendation. Let's make this better. 100%. That's tension.
Yeah, I think absolutely. That's it's funny. I used to tell my sons this all the time when they'd say, we'd have something for dinner and they'd say, I don't like that. And I would say, what you mean to say is you would prefer to have something else. It's not that you don't like it. And I think in those moments as a parent, and I think as a business leader, if I had to only offer one piece of advice on this, I would say extend the time horizon. Take a long view of things. And I think in many cases, you may still find it uncomfortable to do the things you need to do, or you may still feel like you're taking a bit of a risk. But I think it's likely to clear up in your head what the right thing to do is. And so if making an exception for a person in the short term is going to do right by that person, they're going to come back with more energy and enthusiasm, and they're going to do great work. And in the long term, having to give them a little time off or pay them a little more or let them work a bit differently is going to make them a real contributor to the organization, and you're going to be glad you have them around in the long run. Then maybe that's where you need to be really clear about taking care of a person in a moment where they need you to take care of them. If doing something is going to be a little bit more comfortable in the short term, but you can look 3-5 years down the road and you can't see where it adds any value, or maybe it's even going to be a drag on the organization, then that's probably a moment where you need to say, sorry, that's not consistent with what we're trying to do here. And that's easier said than done, I can appreciate, but that almost always will steer you in the right direction. If you come up against some sort of situation or a moment where you feel that the good of the organization or the good of the mission is in opposition in some way with what's good for a person or some people, take a breath, take a step back, and extend the time horizon a little bit and look at it and say, what's really going to be best for these folks and for the mission in the long term? Because there are many times where even doing something as drastic as letting someone go is actually the best thing for that person in the long run. If they're in a bad fit and they're not a good contributor and their teammates are not happy with their performance, in the short term, probably them keeping that job would be their preference. But in the long term, you might be able to really do them a service by sitting them down, having an honest conversation, helping them out in terms of the next chapter, and letting them go find something that's better aligned for them. And there's lots of business decisions where you have to do this too. You have to take a short-term loss. Maybe you have to fire a bad customer and take a little bit of a revenue hit. But if you extend the time horizon, you can see that that's not really what you want to be doing long-term. And the health of the business and the sanity of the people involved is going to be better going forward. In the same way that taking that short-term pain with your kids eating their vegetables is unpleasant and you don't want to do it, but your mission is to raise strong, healthy kids that know how to feed themselves. So you do that. I think that is really the only way to look at this, because to go back to my very first comment, these things have to be harmonious. It can't be, we're going to take a little from the mission in order to give a little more to the people, or give a little more of the mission in order to squeeze a little bit more out of the people. That is a terrible way to conduct a business. You've got to create some harmony. And I think if you can look out long enough, you can find ways to do that. And then you just kind of have to have the guts in the short term to do the things that you know are right, and then have some tact and some professionalism in the execution of those things, whether it's a hard conversation with a client, a coworker, etc.
I really appreciate the fact that you said guts, because I think that's really what it comes down to, is, to be willing to enter into, these dynamics where things are in tension, right? Paradoxical matters, or you're trying to find harmony here. Harmony requires guts. Harmony requires effort, right? You actually have to, do some significant work. Things don't just slide into harmony, basically. And
that's not been my experience.
I mean, yeah, please hit us up. And if anybody else has had that experience, tell us otherwise. But that's just not what we've experienced, right? We don't slide into growth, right? And so one thing that I've been thinking about as I was listening to you talk is it really reminds me of the importance of being really grounded in your, whatever you want to call it, brand identity, in your mandate, in your identity as an organization, and the people within. It reminds me that, and maybe this is directional in terms of how we manage that tension and how we seek harmony, is you really have to be grounded in kind of the two who's. Who do we serve and who are we? In your why do we do what we do? In your what do we do? What do we do here? And then the how is really, I think, quite open to interpretation. It's quite open to flexibility. How do we go about bringing that mission into the world? Like, look, if we know who we're trying to serve and we know who we are, we have our identity kind of locked, and by locked, I mean, we generally understand what are our values, what's our mission, how do people like us do what we do around, here, this and that. How we go about doing it can be very flexible. I mean, goodness gracious, COVID taught us that as industries writ large figured out, like, oh, wow, we can actually do work from home. We actually can just, take our computer, plug it in. We can use a VPN. We can have protected, data and environments and all that good stuff. And we can actually still get some stuff done. That's just an adjustment to how. That wasn't an adjustment to what or why or who. It was just a how. And so when I think about the tension, managing that tension between mission and people, I guess what I'm saying is that if we're talking about how we go about things, and that's something that we can adjust in order to, look at that extended time horizon and understand that this is going to benefit this person or these people in the long run, and by virtue of that will definitely benefit the people that we're serving and the product or service that we're bringing into the world. Game on. Let's get slick about this. Let's get smart. Let's find a way to make it work, because we've been in plenty of situations where we've tried to figure out, how do we find a way to make it work for this person, because this person is actually mission critical. This person's mission critical. We need them on the team. We're going to figure it out. We're going to find a way to make it work, because it actually makes what we do tick. I got all day for that.
Yeah, and one of the things I think you're kind of hinting around, that I'll just say bluntly, is people like to win. And if you talk to any NFL player or anyone who's competed at the highest level, and you ask them who their best coach was, or their favorite coach, or even who would you consider to be a player's coach, what they're going to come to is someone who helped them to win. And I think this is another thing that we've been lately reminding a lot of executives of, as they wrestle with these questions of trying to be really good to their people and all of that, is don't lose sight of the fact that one way you can really take care of your people is to put them in a position to win. Challenge them to compete, appeal to their sense of greatness, show them a map of how they can be successful, let them know how their hard work and contributions are going to contribute to the overall success of the mission. People, as much now as ever, even though it may not feel that way at times, want to be successful. They want to be on a winning team. And innately, people understand that winning teams tend to be more selfless, look out for one another, make the extra pass, work a little harder, do those extra things, make hard decisions, and sometimes have to put a player on the bench who's not really playing well right now, or has a rolled ankle, right? People can understand that. And I just want to encourage anybody who happens to be listening, that is still an excellent way to serve both your mission and your people. And I just don't think there's enough of that. I think about our friend Jason McCarthy over at GoRuck, and I worked there for a while and love Jason like a brother. And I will tell you that I think it's 2015, and then again in 2020, it had to make some serious cuts to that business in order for the business to go forward. And I know Jason, and I know many of those people that were let go in that time, and that was incredibly difficult for him and for the team and for the people, obviously, that had to move on. But I think all of us, to a person, would say that we would prefer for there still to be a GoRuck. I'm glad that GoRuck is still a thing, and I'm glad that they are crushing it right now and growing like gangbusters, because they were able to stay in the fight and keep the mission going, and at a couple of times in the organization's history had to make some really hard choices and move in other directions. And some of those people were brought back as contractors, and certainly did everything we could at different times to take good care of people. But the ability for a leader in those moments to say, we've got to keep this ship seaworthy, and in order to do that, we're going to have to make some hard decisions. By and large, people really understand that, and they want to be a part of the win. And I don't think we can understate that right now enough. Being in a business is really hard, by the way. If you've never led a business at a high level or owned a business, it is not easy. It is competitive. It is hard. Yep. It is so tough to make a living in business and to compete and to do all the things you have to do to be successful. It is not easy. And you need people that understand that and are willing to chip in and do their part. So don't be shy about that. Let people know that you're playing to win and you want them on board for the big win. Put them in positions to be successful and challenge them if you need to. But at the end of the day, you can't sit back and just take it easy and think you're not going to get your clock cleaned in business, because you will.
Absolutely. And I think that, as a teammate, as an individual contributor, or a leader within the organization that may be confronted with decisions that you don't particularly care for. I'm sure all the people at GoRuck in that circumstance were not super stoked about downsizing or being let go. Uh, I think we also maybe need to take some steps forward and be willing to kind of look at things from a rational perspective and understand, just like you said, like there would be no GoRuck today if there's some of those hard decisions aren't made. And I think I'll go, what's really on my mind is, sometimes people are on a team and it's not working out, right? It's things aren't working out. And sometimes I think you have to talk to people about that. You mentioned, like, sometimes letting somebody go, it might end up being the greatest gift for them in the long run, and we could never really know that. I am reminded of the fact that oftentimes, well, not oftentimes, we grow when we get what we need, not what we want. That's what I'm reminded of, is that we grow as people when we get what we need and not what we want. And I've taken my lumps as a leader. I've taken my lumps as an individual contributor on the team, and every time I've taken those lumps, whether it had been, getting let go, or losing a team. I think we talked about that on our first podcast episode. I got what I needed, not what I wanted, and I grew and found out that it turns out that it made me better at delivering the mission. It made me better at bringing to life the value of what we were trying to do, or what I was trying to do in the world. So I don't know. I mean, that might not sound like solace right now to anybody who might be experiencing some of those cutbacks, or some of those losses. I get it. You don't have to be happy about it. I certainly have not been happy about it when I felt like I was taking a step back, or really kind of felt like loss. But we grow when we get what we need, not what we want. I think that's a really important understanding. And if we want our missions to really tick, we need people to grow. We need people to grow so that we as teams can thrive, and that the mission can thrive, and that our customers can thrive and get what they need from us. And if we're constantly giving people what they want and not what they need, well, then there goes that slide into mediocrity. And nobody wants to be on That's a mediocre team. They want to win. Just like you said, they want to win. Nobody shows up and says, I want to suck today. I just don't believe it.
Their future self definitely won't want them to, right? And I think that's maybe my closing remarks in this one would be, it's not an either or. Taking good care of your people helps take care of the mission, and vice versa. You got to have those things in harmony, not like in balance. And I think taking a long timeline on that really solves a lot of your ails. I mean, I would love to just let my kids have breakfast cereal for dinner every night. They'd be super happy every night, but they'd be sick in no time. And I don't really want that for them. And guess what? They don't want that for themselves. So as you said, giving people what they need is really important. And I think as a leader, sometimes you just have to have the stomach to do that. We talk all the time here and everywhere that we talk, is that you're a leader for a reason. You get paid a little more for a reason. And that reason is because you're the person that gets to do those types of things. And it's a privilege. So don't shy away from it.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I mean, honestly, I think that we could probably wrap this one up with the way that we started, and just reminding and remembering, wherever you are and whatever you're doing out there in the world, whatever mission that you are engaged in, keep the mission first. People always. Thanks for joining us, and shoot us a question if you want at contact@appliedleadershippartners.com, and we'll see you guys next time.
All right. Peace.